think we're ready to start. I'd like to introduce Matt from Tobii Dynavox. So he'll be doing a little bit formal presentation for you, and then also discussing the different vocabulary options that are available in the Tobii Dynavox products. Also show you different ways you can access the equipment, and then we'll give you time to get to do some hands-on work with the devices as well.
So thank you, Professor Jordy, for having me here tonight. Thanks everyone for having me as well. Again, my name is Matt Mazalewski. I'm a solutions consultant with Tobii Dynavox. My background, I am an SLP through my education as well. Before I started working for Tobii Dynavox, I was an SLP in a private school setting for about 7 years, where I worked with the pediatric population and device users. We had students from about 5 years of age all the way up to 21, the program expanded to. And we had different device users from low tech all the way up to high tech, to eye gaze users as well. So that's where my AAC interest began, and actually first began in our graduate program as a course such as this, that we had one course that we were able to try different devices and practice with them and try them on our own, which we'll be able to do today. My position within Tobii Dynavox is a solutions consultant. So what I do is, if there's an SLP or family member that reaches out, we coordinate a meeting where I'm able to bring the devices out. So it's either to the home, to hospital settings, to clinics, and then we're able to start the process of getting evaluated for a communication device. So I'm sure a lot of these topics, and we'll kind of skim through them because there are things that you've probably covered by now, but we will certainly focus on communication solutions, so Snap Core first, Communicator 5 as well. Snapseed is also a program that Tobii Dynavox offers, as well as the older software Compass is here. We'll also talk about access methods and maybe focus a little bit more about the whole funding process and what your roles as SLPs would be in that whole process. Let's see. So AAC, so as everyone knows here, we're here talking about augmentative and alternative communication. When I go out into the field and meet with different clients, a lot of times SLPs will reach out and they'll say something like, oh, I know that this person needs eye gaze, and that's what they want to see right away. I generally, rule of thumb is I'll bring all different types of devices because there's always something else that we could try. And even if it doesn't work for them, it is part of the whole process of excluding things that aren't going to work for that particular client. So again, AAC includes unaided communication as well, so any speech attempts, use of gestures, facial expression, body movement, any physical gestures with hands and arms and pointing are also considered that. And aided communication would be using an external device or equipment, anything with recorded speech or synthesized speech, as well as typing on a visual display. So this is a nice graphic just to show you different types of AAC that are out there. Tobii Dynavox offering the high-tech solutions for some of our users. Have you guys seen Tobii Dynavox devices out in the field at all, and have you used some of the software? Yes, yes, no. So there are different options. Our devices are all touch accessible. Some of them do have eye gaze access. They all also have switch ports. So I don't know if you've talked about switch access at all.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
So that's
so switch scanning is something that we'll take a look at as well. So direct select would be someone that could use their hand on a tablet, be able to access the devices, and switch scanning being able to plug in a switch into a port and then using what's called scanning to be able to access the different cells. And there's different types of scanning within that topic as well. So you can do linear scanning, which means it goes one by one. You could do row column scanning as well, or column row. You could do 2 switch step scanning. So those are all different types of options for scanning. And then eye gaze access is you look towards the device and it activates based upon the dwell time that is set up. And once you get some hands-on with the devices, you'll be able to have some more information about what I am discussing. Okay. So AAC is obviously communication partners and how you communicate with someone that's trying to communicate with you. And with the new iSeries devices, we did create a partner window, which you'll be able to see on the back of the devices. There's a small window that projects what the person is typing or what they're trying to communicate. This was created to encourage eye contact with the user. So a lot of times, especially with our device users, we kind of hover over their shoulder or maybe get in their way. This is to be able to see what they're trying to type while maintaining eye contact. And that feature could be turned on and off. Sometimes clients don't want to share what they're about to say, so they do have that option. Okay. So who's a candidate for AAC? So I see different types of clients and different needs out there. I've had clients from about 2.5 years of age all the way up to 80 years of age. And they could be either in need because of a lifelong, because of a developmental disability, maybe something happened where they had a brain injury, or degenerative conditions or something that I do come across often, such as ALS. And then, some people just needing to occasionally be able to supplement their speech, as well as temporary speech impediments or impairments. So it kind of depends on what the severity of the person's disability is, and that's something that's considered and a part of that evaluation process, an evaluation report that gets either submitted to insurance as well. And we'll talk about kind of what the funding process entails as well. Okay. So AAC, our jobs as speech therapists, we want people to be able to communicate, beyond their wants and needs, be able to advocate for themselves. We'll talk about different types of access. So we do have the different types of communication programs, such as Communicator 5, Snap Core First, but there's also access to the devices outside of the communication software. So on the newest devices, we have what's called computer control. What that allows you to do is use the desktop on the Windows-based device, just as you would with a keyboard and mouse, but you're using your eyes to do that. So we'll be able to take a look at that on the iSeries devices. And something Professor Doherty had talked about is when would you use certain either communication software or different page sets, when would you use each one? So you have to look at the communication or the end user and what their needs are. If they're emergent communicators, if someone that's literate or someone that's a little bit older, a lot of our older clients will use text-based communication page sets. So it kind of depends on what their need is, what level they're at, and you're able then to build off of there. Communication software. So these are the different programs. This is actually, it says Snap Plus Core First. Right now the program is called Snap Core First. They took the plus away. I'm not sure why, but it's not there. But what I'll be able to do is pull up the software to kind of show you what I mean by all that. So this is essentially a communication program that's available across all of our devices. I'll show you what it looks like to kind of set up a new user and what you would have to do when someone does get a new device. So initially when they turn on the device, it's charged. This is kind of the first screen that you would see to start doing that setup. From here, you would be able to pick, again, depending on the user, if you want to do a Core First vocabulary page set. We also have a Core First bilingual, English-Spanish, so what that lets you do is toggle back and forth between English and Spanish speaking. Sometimes we have bilingual users that maybe will use the English page sets with the speech therapist that they're working with, or in a school setting, and then when they're home, they would want to use the Spanish-speaking page sets just to communicate with their family members. The other area that Tobii Dynavox recently did updates to are aphasia page sets, so you'll be able to see some of them that give some picture cues, and there's vocabulary within there that's specific more to adults with aphasia, and there's different grid sizes that you can pick from there. And also a text-based page set that is just text. There's no pictures, so some are more literate users, adult users that can, access buttons that only have text on them without any pictures and cues and things like that. So that's how you would pick. So say we pick the aphasia page set. I'll have to log in, maybe name it something, and then from here you would pick a voice. You do have young voices, male, female. There's different types of voices that generally our clients would like to go through all of them just to hear what they sound like and what matches them and what they feel like they could use. Within the aphasia page set, you do have these 3 different types of grid sizes. When you look at the grid size, and that could be across any access method, so if it's eye gaze access, touch access, or switch scanning, you'd want to see what the patient or the client is able to do. So if they could target smaller buttons, you might want to go with the 6x5. If you want to maybe start them with a 3x3 just to teach them where things are and give them bigger targets to hit, then you would start with that size. And same idea with switch scanning. The more cells that are on there, the longer it takes to scan through things. So maybe you might want to start in the middle to let them learn what's on the system and have them successfully be able to communicate their wants and needs and any messages they may have. So say we pick a 4x3, it'll create a user for us. And this is what a general aphasia page set would look like. All of these buttons can be customized. You can, when you go into the names, you could put the actual patient's name or the user's name in there. You could add family members' names if you need to. All these buttons could be programmed to be more specific and personalized to the user. Within here, so again, this would be kind of the word list menu as the main page. Quick fires are areas where you would quickly be able to communicate some messages. So things like greetings are on here. Anything with personal needs, something that quickly needs to be communicated by the user. Generally, let's see, the messages that are quick fires do not go into that message bar because it's again something that you quickly want to communicate, but some of them here do go up there so that you can start putting sentences together and phrases and things like that. Any questions so far about SnapCore?
So with the aphasia page set, I noticed the icons are not PCS, so they're
different, yeah. So
they're customized
exactly for the aphasia page sets.
To provide more information to the icons. So that's just something I picked up on.
Yeah, and we'll take a look at a regular core page set just to show you the differences.
Right. So this would be an advantage for someone with aphasia since the line drawings have more detail and have a little bit more meaning compared to when we did our activity where we had a guess. One of the groups had, I copied the home screen for SnapCore, and we did an activity where then I whited out the words and they had to guess what the symbols were, but they were PCS, so yeah.
Exactly, and then across all the systems you could put actual pictures as well, so sometimes our users, especially younger users, they might want actual pictures if they're making choices for things that are familiar to them. You can put actual pictures on here as well. There's also a whiteboard area, so if you have someone that wants to do some drawings, you can do that as well. Within here, there's also topic grids. So these are, again, topic-specific areas that could be personalized and programmed so that those messages are on there for their caregivers. The visual scene is a nice area. This is, again, when you're working in either speech therapy sessions, you can bring some of these topics up to be able to discuss and make some comments about topic-specific areas or ideas, right? So this is a meal scene. There's some messages around here that you can convey or that you would convey while you're having this conversation. And all of these can also be reprogrammed or reprogrammed to be more specific to the user. And keyboard access. So all of our communication programs do have access to different types of keyboards. So the one that we're looking at right now is a general QWERTY keyboard, as you see up here. The keyboards do have predictive writing, so as you're typing something out, it does start, predicting the words that you may be wanting to type, so that you don't have to go letter by letter. So if you're thinking about access again, if you have someone that's using maybe eye gaze, if they're going letter by letter, it might be a little fatiguing, but if they could just look at the word and be able to communicate and put their phrases together that way a little bit quicker. There's also the option to put ABC keyboards on here. There's keyboards that are bigger that you can use, so it depends on what your client's needs are. If there's any visual acuity issues, you can also make adjustments to that. That's the aphasia page set. Let me see if I can pull up a different type of user. So, okay, I'll show you this one. So this is a core first bilingual user. So this is probably something that you were familiar with that was printed out. Core words being using the Fitzgerald key to be able to put some words together to express things like wants and needs, or any messages, anything that the client may want to communicate. This is what I was talking about for a bilingual user. So this button will be here, and it changes the vocabulary to be in Spanish. So it's the same vocabulary, but it just gets mirrored and changed into Spanish language. There's also a voice or a language-specific voice option within here, so that you have a boy's voice for the English page sets, but then also a Spanish boy's voice for the Spanish page sets, so it doesn't sound like like me trying to talk Spanish. It has this voice specific, so the pronunciations are better, so you can make those choices. There. Again, same idea with quick fires within here, messages that you quickly want to convey, feelings and things like that. The buttons can be programmed with a label, but it could also be different to what the button speaks. So the button could be labeled as happy, but then the message, when it's activated, could say, I am very happy, or something like that. So sometimes it depends on the client. If there's too many words on the screen, they might have a more difficult time, so you can change those and modify them. And then within here, there's topics as well. So these 6 topics that are here, they're blank pages that you can create new topics for your clients, but there's also some pre-programmed topics that are here as well. So let's see, it's this one. Sound coming through.
I don't know, maybe the sound is down. So if it's with you, the HDMI, it should give you sound, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Is there a button?
Talk to me like an adult.
Yeah. So you can slow that down as well. You can write pronunciation exceptions into it, so you can really customize it to your user, because it's such a huge part of their lives. So a lot of times they'll, even picking out a voice, they want to take their time with that, be able to maybe slow it down a little bit, make it deeper and whatnot. A lot of times clients do like to make those changes. And then again, this is just a different type of keyboard that's on here. That maybe for some of the younger users, you might want to separate it a little bit so that they still have access to the letters, but there's not as much information on the screen. Another feature within Snap Core First is this magnifying glass. So what that allows you to do is search for things that are on here, which I've personally used as well. Sometimes you're showing something to a client and they talk about, oh, I like bubbles or something like that. Oops. And then you want to get to that certain area, right? So this gives you the different categories or different lists of where that word is. So say we go into the topics menu page. It also tells you how to navigate to there. So this is nice to use with clients if they're working on navigation, but also for you to be able to find the bubbles page. So now it's already pre-programmed down here. You don't have to worry about creating a page set for an activity. A lot of times when you're out there in the field, whether it's in a hospital setting, a school setting, programming time is very limited to none, right? So it's nice to have some information that's on here so that you can just pull it up and be able to use it from the beginning of your session. There's,
Can you read the bubbles?
it's really fast though, I guess.
Can you read the bubbles?
So again, you can make those adjustments for the user there. And then I'll show you the other page set that I have on here is a text-based user. So we looked at the aphasia page sets, but this is kind of, again, a simple, a similar layout, I would say. So there's that toolbar that's on the side. It is a 7x10 grid size on here. But again, there are some messages, there's different categories, but it's all text-based. And you can, program these and make them more personalized to the user as needed. And there's things like the keyboard within here as well. So it kind of depends. When we go out, and do a demonstration, or I do the demonstration, I usually ask the therapist to tell me a little bit about the client that we're going to see. Part of that being just to prepare a certain page set for the user. We certainly discuss their positioning, so I always ask, are they able to sit upright at a table so that we can just bring in the tabletop mount and set them up, or is there the need for me to bring in a rolling floor stand to be able to have them set up if they're in a recliner in their bed. So there are different types of options for mounting. Here. So that's kind of a quick summary of SnapCore. Do you want me to go into some of the editing at all, or just?
I guess just quick, maybe just one cell, just so they can kind of see that it's
I'll
not
show you kind of.
horrendous.
Yeah, it's a lot of times, and I'd say it's kind of like when you get a new cell phone, sitting down with the program, seeing what works, what doesn't work, being able to make some changes, do some programming beforehand. So again, within SnapCore first, this button here takes you to the home page. If you have things in the dashboard, this is how you can quickly get there. This is again that search button, and within here, the pencil and the gear puts you into, should be up there, right up there, into edit mode. So when you're in edit mode, this toolbar comes up down here, and say I want to create a button, so I would select the one that I want, and let's see, what should we label this button? Any ideas? Let's see.
That's cool.
That's cool. So see how within the label, there's a picture that comes up, but within the label, you can also have the label to be different than the message. Remember I talked about what's on the button versus what's being spoken, or you can just leave it the same. You can search for a picture, so when you click on that magnifying glass here,
I like
it gives you different options. Yeah, I guess you stand by walls when you're cool, so that could be an option. But if you don't want a picture, you can just exit out. You could also use this camera feature here. Remember I talked about being able to add actual pictures, that's where you would add that. And all the devices do have cameras on them so that you can just take the device and take a picture. So that's cool, and then the action's already here. It's going to speak the message. You just click done, and
that's cool.
And that's cool. It's pretty quick. I would say it's pretty intuitive, and it's, once you sit down and do a few, it's kind of the same across the board. Within that edit area, you also have the ability to do multiple selections. So I pick this square that's here, and say I want to pick a couple of them, but I don't want them to be on the screen. So what I would do is click this eye. You see how they got a little bit gray? Now when you've done, it takes it away from the system. So maybe if you're using, you're working on a specific grid size that's maybe of smaller cells, but you want the student or the user to focus on certain ones, you could hide the ones that you don't want them to have access to. And you could always unhide them. Just because you hide them doesn't mean they are deleted. However, you can delete them as well. And another thing I'll show you as well for programming. So say, you want to take this button but create a category. label this one family. And maybe you don't want to use a picture, but then you would, let's see, you'd want to link it to something that's either a new page, so a new page will give you a blank template where you can add more things to or create buttons, or you could link it to an existing page set that's already on the device. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for and how you want to do the programming.
Family.
So then this one connects you to a family page set. Any questions about programming? Has anyone here done any programming or using high-tech devices?
You know,
Okay.
they will for their project.
Oh, there you
Put
go.
on the iPad.
Those.
So I noticed you can get Snapcore for free now in an app. So I was able to download it.
So like you're talking about the 30-day trial, or you're talking about the my tobii dynavox account?
Okay, yes, maybe clarify that for me, because
Yeah,
I was
sure.
able to do it, but
Yeah.
then I don't know what
Yeah.
the stipulations are.
So our software you can download for free as a trial version for 30 days that if you have clients to try it with, you get a full functioning software that you can access. If you're a speech therapist that has an ASHA number, with your ASHA number you are able to create a My Tobii Dynavox account.
So I do have one, that's
And
right,
then
okay.
you're able to have full access to our software for as long as you have your ASHA number. And that's with the reason why we did that is so that you as SLPs have access to our software to be able to try with clients. So a lot of times, that's the first thing that I'll share with SLPs, and then I'll get an email saying something like, oh, I tried the software, can you now come out because I want to talk about access? Can we look at more user-specific devices? That kind of starts that conversation. This here is Communicator 5. This is a page set that I use often when I go out into the field in hospital settings, some of our ALS patients, where some of our adult users need some pictures for context, and you can always take these out as well. But they're able to communicate their wants and needs in different types of settings. So there's
Right. Please turn me to the right.
things like that. So that deeper voice is more adult voice. That's Ryan. These page sets do have the yes, no, not sure on the bottom, so that they can quickly communicate with their caregivers, with their doctors, any messages that they may have. Our users do have access again to keyboard, so this is just a different type of QWERTY keyboard that's within here. And again, predictive writing is also available here. And you'll be able to access those on all the devices that are there, just to play around with and see kind of what that is. And we'll go over different access methods, like I said. Once we're on there, we'll do a calibration if you'd like to try eye gaze. And what that means is the eye tracker that's on the bottom of the device takes measurements of your eyes as you're looking at the screen, and then you'll be able to access the device with your eyes. Another area within Communicator 5 that a lot of clients have asked us, and it's also within Snapcore First, are some pre-programmed pages for things like Amazon Echo or Google. So a lot of clients that we come across now, they do have smart homes, or they have something at home that they could use. So this device gets picked up just as your voice would be, so you can create commands so that they can communicate with something like an Alexa. So if you have music, you could always say
Some music. Alexa, play some music.
there's one in here, but it generally picks up, and it'll you can program those messages. So anything you would speak to the Alexa, you can just program those on here. And it kind of depends. Some clients are like, I don't want another thing in the house, or they don't want a speaker or a microphone, but it is an option. And then the other thing we'll take a look at, like I said, with the devices is access to them outside of the communication software. So devices that are generally covered by a funding source, such as insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid, are what's called locked devices. So you have the ability to do updates to them, but anything outside of the speech communication page or communication software, they do not have access to. And that's because insurance companies see the devices as speech generating first and foremost. Tobii Dynavox, we understand that people may need access to things like email, to have access outside of the communication software. Once the device is in their possession, the client has the ability to call our company and have the device unlocked. Right now there's a one-time $25 fee, but once they do that, they have full access to the device. And we just have to keep those things separate because of Medicare and Medicaid laws. And then I'll show you also within here.
So Matt, just to clarify, is Communicator 5 then the basic communication software of tobii Dynavox, and is SnapCore within Communicator 5 or SnapCore separate?
So they're two separate
Okay,
communication
so
programs.
maybe clarify that.
Yep. So SnapCore first. A lot of times, even though we're expanding on like the aphasia page set, the text-based users, SnapCore first is if we have some emerging communication users, they would go with SnapCore first. There's some symbol-based communication page sets. You know, if you're starting with someone that has difficulty with access or they're just learning, starting with a grid size that's like a 2x2 and then growing it from there. Whereas Communicator 5, I'll show you what.
Because you're in Communicator 5 now.
Yep, so this is Communicator 5. So some of our more text-based users and people that would want their email set up, this is where you would have them go for that. So I'll show you.
So other page sets within Communicator 5 are not really like here, like I'm
So
used to going here.
Yeah, so there are, so basically you would pick what type of user you have. If it's emerging communication, simple communication, or text-based communication. So the one that we were just looking at is more of a text-based communicator. So I'll show you kind of within here. A lot of times with our adult users, they'll want this page set within Communicator 5 to be set up. So what this is kind of their main area for keyboard access, if they want to check their emails, calendar, and things like that. Some more, some of our more text-based literate users would use this type of layout. That being said, you can still add things from the emerging communication area. So there's some simple cause and effect activities. So maybe some games that take away the pressure from learning the language piece, but you're still working on access. So when you're using high-tech communication device, those are the things that you do have to focus on. You're working on the access portion and the language development piece. So there's some simple games and activities within here, some matching games and things like that users can have access to. And there are, actually within the simple communication area, there are some different page sets for vocabulary. The devices generally, other than the SC tablet, which is our iOS-based system, that only has SnapCore First software on there. Everything else you can get with Communicator 5 and or SnapCore First, depending on what the client needs are. And when they put those two communication software programs on there, as an SLP, you would have the choice which one you want to work with. You kind of judge what your client is able to do. What they do need pictures and they do need text, then you would maybe start with SnapCore First. And then pick the grid size from there to see what their capabilities are. I would say SnapCore First for the symbol-based communication page sets, or any of them, is a little bit more intuitive in terms of programming. It's a little bit easier. You go to that edit button, change it. Sometimes this is a little bit more complex. I had used with some of my students Communicator 5 in the past because SnapCore First wasn't out yet.
Right.
So that's kind of what was on the devices. We would go from there. But I would definitely say, take a look at both and then see what works for your client.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they were going to be phasing this out or like if this was still.
So it's still there.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that they're trying to build up, more on
SnapCore,
SnapCore, exactly. But it's Communicator 5 is still available. There are users out there that do use Communicator 5 that want to stick to Communicator 5, so that's what we have.
Okay.
Any questions so far? Alright, let's see if we can back to the top. Compass is another software that we had that was probably one of our more original software options, and it does have some specific page sets within there, kind of what we're trying to mimic with Snap Core first with the aphasia page sets. I don't know if you're familiar with Pod at all. Pod is a page set that was developed for kind of like a flip book that they have, but it's also, we've worked with the developer of that to put it within Compass as well. So sometimes if therapists want the high tech access to Pod, it would be something that could be put up into Compass. And over those. And again, there's different options within each area when you're setting up that user. You can pick, if it's emerging, symbol or text-based communication that's needed, but you can still pull page sets from different levels of users. So Snapseed, you'll be able to see Snapseed within the, I think it's set up within the SC tablet, which is the iPad-based device. This is another solution for some of our much younger users, so users that do not speak, maybe slower in learning to talk, or speak, but are difficult to understand. So I've seen this program be used in early intervention settings. So what this allows you to do is take a picture of a scene or anything that you need, and then you create what are called hotspots, and then you record your voice onto those hotspots, and when the child or the user accesses that picture, it'll speak back to them and they'll be able to communicate that way. So again, a little bit more, it shows you an actual picture rather than some symbols, so it's a little bit easier for younger users to have access to. But I've also had adults that use it as well. Again, aphasia, adults that would need a picture of, say, like a kitchen, and then you can label things for them to be able to access and communicate that way. Okay, so onto the fun stuff, the hardware solutions. So like I said, the SC tablet is our Apple-based product, so it is essentially an iPad that's in a speech case. Together, that's called an SC tablet, and it does have its durable medical equipment code, so it is a funded device that you can put through insurance. If you just get an iPad and put communication software on there, that was not something that would be funded or covered by insurance. We also have the Indy and the Indy 7. So I have the Indy 7, which is the smaller tablet over there. That's touch or switch accessible. And then the I-110 is the smaller black one there. And that's our touch accessible or switch accessible device that's most durable. So they do drop testing on it. There's Gorilla Glass on the front. It's also water resistant as well. So it's something that some of our users that are out in the community, out of the house a lot, that's something that they generally do go for. And the Windows-based devices, such as Indy and the I-110, you can put Communicator 5 or Snap Core first on, but the SC tablet, the Apple-based product, is only Snap Core first. And the devices on the right here, you have the new i-series, so the i13 and i16 and i13 came out in October of last year. So that's our latest product that we have. There's a brand new eye tracker that's in there. Like I said, it has that partner window on the back. The buttons that you see on the front of the device, there's functions that could be programmed for touch access. So you as a caregiver could pause, put up the track status or the volume up and down. And the buttons are also eye gaze accessible, which is nice. So if you have users that want to raise the volume, they could just look at the button and it activates. And then the bottom right device is the EM12. Essentially, it's a Surface Pro that has an eye tracker and external speakers attached to it, and it's our more portable eye gaze device. So some of our ALS patients prefer that type of device. It's something that's a little bit smaller. Some users that are able to maybe access a touchscreen in the beginning, they would start with that, and then as the need arises, you can add the eye gaze interaction to that.
Is the EM12 funded?
Yep, the EM12 is
Okay.
a funded device as well.
And then the Indie that I saw that was discontinued as a funded
So
device.
exactly. So the Indie now, that's on the bottom left, is you can just directly purchase the device off of our website. The Indie 7, which is a smaller version of that, is still funded. So that one is at least still funded. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about devices? It's kind of hard to talk about without you having tried it yet, but we'll do that next. So access methods. So we talked about different types of access methods for the devices. So direct selection being touch, mouse, or eye gaze access. Indirect selection is using a switch, using a joystick. And all of our products do accommodate all those different types of access methods. Within the touch access methods or touch access capabilities, you could change settings to be either just touch access is I touch this, it activates. Touch enter, you can make modifications to how quickly something gets activated. So if you have some users that kind of tap on things, you might want to slow it down so that it doesn't repeatedly activate the device. Touch exit is you touch something, but then when you pull away, it activates. Scanning is switch scanning. Mouse pause, I know it says pause, but mouse access is something that's also available. The other option with our devices is you can put a head mouse on them. So that is, it's a camera that goes on top of the device, gets plugged into the USB port. You have a little dot that you can either wear on your head or on the brim of your glasses, and then you can move your head around to be able to use the controller that's on the device. So that's another access method as well. There's audio touch, so for sound, and joystick access, and then eye tracking, obviously. Those are different types of things. One thing from here that I'd like to mention is the key guard. So some of our users do require an overlay on the devices. So if they're touch access users but they have difficulty getting to certain cell sizes, you can get a key guard to be able to be customized. So as you see in the bottom left corner, specific amount of cells that are on there, and you can get it from even like a one big box to all the way up to like 80 cells or something like that. So it really depends on what the user is able to do. That being said, you kind of have to be mindful of what they're able to access and then how much information you can put on the screen, because then you're a little bit limited to what's on there. Different switches. So this is a whole, you could spend a whole class probably talking about different types of switches that are out there. Generally the switches are either you plug into a switch port and then you're able to activate it and it sends the command to the device. There are Bluetooth switches as well. And then there's different ones that are blink switches, there's puff switches, that someone has a switch in their mouth and they activate it by blowing air into it. There are single switches, double switches, so it really does depend on what the user is able to access. In terms of switches, that's something, again, that we discussed during the evaluation process. You know, I have some switches that I bring with me that we talk about most appropriate access methods. In the past, I've had students I had a student that was using a device, one of the older i series, not with eye gaze, but she had two switches set up. And she had a wheelchair that had a tray, and we put the switches upside down under her tray, and she was using her knees to activate them, and she was using step switch scanning, and it was like amazing. I think she could do it quicker than I could touch the screen. It's really nice to see. So again, with switch scanning, there's different patterns, like I said, activation methods. So it kind of depends on, you know, as you're working with the user, you might want to try all these and see what they're most successful with. I would say I generally see column and row, or row column scanning the most. So what it does is scans the rows, and then once you select the row you need, then it goes into the columns. Linear scanning is an option, but it is a little bit more time consuming because it goes cell by cell. There's different variations of joysticks that we have out there. And that's the head mouse that I was talking about. I feel like head stick or mouse stick I haven't seen as often. I don't know if you see those anymore.
Out. I think with eye gaze it's sort of become more preferable, I guess, than the head mousing.
So again, you
Yeah.
that's something to consider as well when you're evaluating the patient to see if what their head neck control is, if how fatiguing that could be after a long period of time. Whereas if you have them on eye gaze, they can sit back as long as their eye tracker is picking up their eyes, they can
Right.
activate it, and there's not that much movement that they need to do, if
Right.
any. So let's skip this just talks about what happens when the eye tracker takes measurements, and you'll be able to do that once we get onto the device. And you follow along with the gaze interaction and the eye gaze settings. Okay, so a part of it, and we'll probably finish here before we move on. I don't know if I'm good on time.
Yeah, no, you're great.
We'll talk about how to get an AC device. So the process generally starts, like I said, either a family member or an SLP will find out about tobii dynavox either by word of mouth, Google, going on our website, and what they do is if they reach out to me, I'll say, are you connected with an SLP? The speech language pathologist is crucial to the whole process and to start the process. So you as the SLP would be the one to start doing the evaluation. So what they do is they'll coordinate a meeting between myself, the family or the user, and the SLP where we look at different types of devices. We talk about access. We talk about what's needed, what the needs are, what the capabilities of the user is, and go from there to start that process. Once we have that meeting, the SLP gathers the information that's needed, and they are able to create an account within our eFunding website. So what that allows you to do is start writing the report within the eFunding website on tobiidynavox.com, and a part of that process is that I am able to generate a quote from our meeting. So once the device is decided, the communication software we talk about as well, if there's any access methods, that's also a part of the conversation. And then the other part that's crucial is different mounting options. So this device here, the i16, is on a tabletop mount. We also have floor stand mounts, so there's a base that looks like this. There's a vertical tube that comes out, and then there's an arm that holds the device. So that could be for users that either need to be in bed to use the device, or if they're in recliner or on their couch, that allows them a little bit more flexibility. And the third option being a wheelchair mount, something that gets attached to the wheelchair. So again, the SLP is the one that starts the report writing online. We gather some information from the family. As a part of that process, we do need a prescription from a physician's office or physician, as well as their face-to-face notes. So anytime a patient is seen by a doctor, they take notes. So that's also part of the information that we need to collect to be able to submit to insurance. But none of that can be completed until the SLP's evaluation report is written. Using that eFunding website, you do get feedback from our funding consultants that will take a look at your report, give you feedback of, can you expand a little bit more on the expressive language piece? Can you give some more information? Their job is to read reports every single day. They know exactly what to look for, what the insurance companies look for. You're assigned a funding consultant based on the type of funding that you have. So if it's private insurance and Medicare, there's a certain group of funding consultants for that, and then Medicaid is a separate group as well. And there's different things that they look for those specific funding sources, but they're great with giving you feedback as well. So once your report is completed, we get the prescription. So you also need a prescription from the doctor for the device. Tobii Dynavox gets that from the doctor's office along with the face-to-face notes. Then we put everything together and it gets submitted to insurance, and we wait for a response from them. So generally, there's always the question of how long does the whole process take. I would say the fastest that I've seen everything come together would be about 4 weeks, or maybe a little bit less. And again, everything has to fall into place. The SLP has to finish their report. We have to have, great contact with the doctor's office to be able to get that information. That usually is a holdup. It does take a while sometimes, depending on the doctor's office. But once everything is submitted, it's about, I would say, 7 to 14 days before we get a response from the insurance. And then once the device, let's say, is approved, then we get a shipment notification. They verify the shipping address. Someone has to sign for it. And then we schedule a meeting where I do the training and the setup of the device with the family, with the SLP. The more people that are there, the better, I would say, so that we're all on the same page and learning about device. Questions in terms of funding? I know it's something that's probably not in your mind at all right now, but down the line, you do have that capability as an SLP to start the process for someone, which is nice.
Yeah, I know. I didn't get into very details. We talked about SGDs and obviously requirements that if someone's going through insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, then those entities would fund an SGD. But as Matt was explaining, he went into more detail as far as the steps, and I can review that again when we talk about assessment. Okay, so but just to kind of reiterate, for Medicare, okay, is more stringent, I think, of all of the funding sources, in that the client actually has to visit the doctor first. So there's a strict hierarchy steps you have to follow before you actually conduct your assessment. And in those doctor notes, so the patient has to go to their doctor first and discuss the need of a communication device. So you can correct me if I'm
so generally too, or sometimes it starts with, kind of depends on where the family is at. If they've either, a lot of times actually, for some of our younger users or someone maybe with ALS, the doctor will say, hey, you need to look into this because they know that the need is there too. So that's
right, and that has to be reflected in the physician notes. So that's what Matt was talking about. So the step one is the patient has to visit their doctor first and say, I'm having communication difficulties. I think I might need a device, and then the doctor will recommend then that patient receive an augmented communication evaluation by a licensed SLP. Okay, so then that's when we come in, right, and then we then conduct the evaluation, and then obviously we need assistance from Matt for equipment to come in and do that demo and determine the outcomes of that device trial. If again Matt bringing the equipment, and then once the assessment is completed, then the patient then can go back to the doctor and get the prescription, right? So
sometimes, that's the way to do that as well. A lot of times it just helps
for the device.
doctor.
Okay, so if we're recommending a tobii dynavox device, then they go back to the doctor and get the prescription. Right? So,
and it's, each device does have its own medical code because it is durable medical equipment. So the device has its own code, the access method as well. So if eye-gaze interaction is needed, that has its own code. And then the mounting option is also a different type of code, but everything does get put together into that packet.
Right, and then, so the paperwork then is all sent to the funding department that Matt was explaining, and then they put in the claim, to the insurance company. So, but that step has to be followed. So the patient can't just go to the doctor and say, I need a prescription for an I-series. I want the I-series device.
Exactly, Nothing happens without the SLP's input and evaluation report.
And exactly, and with Medicare, they require those copies, and I'm not sure if Medicaid may also.
So it kind of depends. I know things have been changing as well. Another thing to consider, sometimes with Medicaid or in some insurance companies, what they'll ask is, you can submit everything, and once they see the information, even the evaluation report, they'll say, before we could approve this, you need to do a 30-day trial. So then tobii dynavox, we work with the insurance company or Medicaid, set up a trial where the client can trial the device for 30 days, and the SLP can gather some more information and answer some specific questions that these funding sources are looking for. If a family or an SLP just wants to do a trial just on their own, that they do have the option to go through the rental process, so there are costs associated with that. But you can put up to 4 weeks of that rental towards the purchase of a device. So it kind of depends, what the funding sources are, what the family feels comfortable with SLP. A lot of times you go into evaluation and it's obvious that they need some sort of speech generating device. It's just a matter of starting the process and picking the correct one. So who's ready to try some devices out here? Any questions about funding? It's something that you'll definitely cover, like I said.
Yeah, we'll circle back to it again, but just to kind of explain a little bit, and so you're aware of the steps.
Yeah, so it just kind of goes through resources. So like I said, within tobii dynavox, myself being the local representative, the funding support is the funding team, and technical support is anything that's needed after devices in the user's possession. So I was going to try out different devices. Let's see. So